What is going on, everybody? We are back with our last team review. This has kind of been a pretty long project. I think we started like either the week that training camp started or the week before. So it's been over a month or about a month, but we're finally here. It's August 25th. The last weekend of the preseason's happening, and we're on to the Washington Commanders, who I would say, at least for a couple of these guys, probably some of the biggest risers in terms of what's played out over training camp and preseason games are a couple guys on the Washington Commanders team. Dad, I know you have talking about Sam Howell a couple days ago, and maybe you hit gold with him, huh?
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to see. I'm sorry about that. He is, essentially going to be a rookie quarterback. I know he played a little last year, but if you see upside in guys, when they're on the field, and they don't look like shit, and they don't look like deer in the headlights and stuff like that, and they're able to, for a quarterback, lead your offense, make some throws and stuff like that, and that's what you kind of see. Is the guy going to be, Mahomes Jr. or anything like that? I doubt it, but we'll see. Some of the best off-season news that I heard was when they finally sold the former Washington Redskins, and then the new owner, I guess Magic Johnson is a new owner, and he says, yeah, we're going to consider a name change. And it's like, man, that's the best stuff I ever heard. The Commanders suck, I'd rather have it say Washington football team. Yeah,
I know. I kind of like them.
Yeah, it's like that's unique, and and I've been watching football long enough. There's storied history, behind the old the Washington football team, we'll call it. So they were really good in the 80s and the 90s. So it'd be nice if they got relevant again.
Yeah, definitely. They're one of those teams that you don't realize that we're kind of the gold standard there for a while. So, one of them at least. But yeah, we'll get into it. We're looking at this team from a redraft point of view. We'll throw in other stuff, dynasty and all that. Half PPR. If we throw out rankings or points per game, it's half PPR based. Just so you know, and we'll start off with the quarterback position in Sam Howell. If you picked him up late in dynasty leagues last year, you're happy, you're excited. You got maybe a free, at least starter for a little bit. He's looked good. He's looked good in the preseason. I'm intrigued by him, definitely. I'm going to be targeting him because I like to take quarterbacks late. He's going to be another guy that I pick up and throw on my bench for the first couple of weeks and see how he plays out. So, Dad, I'll let you start with Sam Howell. Do you kind of feel the same? Obviously, you don't want him as your QB1, but as a backup with upside.
You have some balls if you did that. But when he played, I'll go back to his college years. He had his second to the last year at North Carolina. It was a pretty good year, and he had some really stud running backs. He had Javonte Williams, and there was another guy. It could have been Michael Carter, and they were really good. Then I think his last year in college, I think the running backs moved on and stuff like that, and maybe they got a new offensive coordinator and things weren't so good. So he was only drafted in the 5th round last year. He's not huge. He's 6'1". He moves around pretty good. I like seeing new quarterbacks. I hope. I'm glad. It's kind of telling that Carson Wentz isn't in the NFL.
Yeah.
Right now, but
seriously.
So let's see what Sam Howell can do.
Yeah. I've mentioned this before. I don't remember when, but something about Sam Howell that I think maybe a lot of people don't know. I think it was going into the 2021 season. So before college football started in 2021, Sam Howell was kind of considered as like this guy's going to be the first quarterback whenever he is eligible to.
Yeah, I remember
you know,
that.
to go out.
Yeah.
And so he had the talent to be at that. Now, again, that doesn't always pan out. I'm not saying like this is why he's going to be good, but that's why things change so much. But that talent was there. He had a bad year, I think, that year and last year. Not a bad year, but just didn't live up to the hype. Drafted in the 5th round, and the guy's super intriguing. I mean, he ran for it might have been the 2020 season, one of those years. But anyways, he ran for over 800 yards his last year in college. So he can move, he can run, which is great for fantasy. So, holy crap, Trey Lance traded to the Cowboys.
What?
Yep. For a mid-round pick, whatever that means.
Jeez.
We have breaking news on the show. We'll have to talk about that later. Just got an underdog update. Anyways, that threw me off a bit. But Sam Howell, he's intriguing. He's looked good. He has good players on this team, good supporting cast. Eric Bieniemy, I think, is a really good offensive coordinator. And I think he's going to put him in the best situations to succeed. So I'm all in on Sam Howell in terms of taking him as a backup quarterback with high upside. Like, I'm just looking at who he's going before or after, like a Jimmy Garoppolo, Mac Jones. Like, get out of here with those guys. Like, give me Sam Howell. 2 quarterback leagues, okay. Maybe you want to take a little safer option. 1 quarterback league, take Sam Howell. See what the upside is. So,
I have a dynasty league, and he's my QB3, so I don't have to play him. I tried to trade him, hoping I could get something really big. Put him on the trade bait. I'm not doing that now. I want to see how he plays, and maybe I can get more. If I'm, if a dynasty league, young quarterback, those are multi quarterback league. I mean, those guys are gold. So.
Yeah, for sure. And the backup, Jacoby Brissett, a good backup to have. And for fantasy purposes, I think you can feel pretty safe. Just looking at what he did before last year, he was kind of looked at as like fantasy poison, where he just couldn't. All the skill position players didn't do well. Amari Cooper was having a hell of a year with Jacoby Brissett last year, so comfortable if Sam Howell is not good or gets hurt. You're comfortable with Brissett coming in and being able to kind of steady the ship, and you're not going to start selling off all your Washington pieces. So, moving on to the running back. So another interesting group. Brian Robinson Jr., rookie last year, had the unfortunate situation where he got shot and had to come back from that, and he came back. And, for as much as I don't really like Brian Robinson in terms of just his profile and skill set, like, he's looked better in the preseason. They're throwing him the ball. And they obviously like him. They're going to give him carries. The guy's going to get over 200 carries. I don't really see that how he doesn't. He had over 200 last year and he missed 5 games. So, I think he can be just a pretty solid volume player. Half PPR, he's better in standard than half PPR, but there's the chance that they throw him the ball. So, Dad, Brian Robinson, I'll tell you here, is being drafted as the RB32, and looks like you can get him 5th, 6th, about 8th round. How you feeling if he's your, I don't know, RB3, RB4?
Yeah, I think I'm okay with it. I've kind of always liked the guy, and you had to give him a pass. After getting shot, you didn't really think he was going to play last year, and so he did play, and and he looked okay. I don't know what his stats were. Thought he had about
200 carries, 800 yards.
Yeah. Okay, so now you add 5 games to that stuff, and you could have a pretty productive running back. So I kind of like the guy.
They like him. The biggest thing is they like him too. And sometimes we have to ignore what we think about players and just say, this team thinks this. It doesn't matter what I think about him. It matters what Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy think of him. I think they really like him. So, he just seems like a solid. Like, I don't want to rely on him to be my starter every week, but if an injury happens or a bye weeks, throw him in there, and you can get 8 to 12 points or something like that. So fine with Brian Robinson. I do think Antonio Gibson to me has a little more upside. Just I think of what Jerick McKinnon did with the Chiefs, and now their offensive coordinator Tom Washington, and could Gibson kind of have that Jerick McKinnon with maybe a few more carries thrown in there type of impact? I think he's a really good, really explosive player, and I hope finally they start to use him in a more creative way. Like, we've seen Gibson be successful in fantasy. I think it was 2020. Gibson was the RB14 in standard, which he was RB12 in half PPR. Even in 2021, he was the RB10. So he's had 2 top 12 seasons. I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. Antonio Gibson was the 10th best running back in fantasy football in 2021. Fell off last year, but I hope they get back to kind of using him, more creatively. So, Dad, he's kind of going around the same range as Brian Robinson. Are you fine with Gibson as well if Brian Robinson's gone?
Well, I think I like Gibson, and it appears he has a role in the offense, and I like your analogy there of McKinnon and stuff like that. So now we got hopefully a little better offensive coordinator, Bieniemy, that you've identified and stuff like that. So, I think I'd be okay with taking him. If I'd rather have him as an RB4 than maybe, as an RB3 or something. But his rushing game kind of fell off a little bit last year. But
it did, and you can get him as your he's going in around 8. So depending on how you draft, if you avoid quarterback and tight end, then theoretically you could have 4 running backs and 4 receivers, and Antonio Gibson is your RB4. If you do like to take a quarterback or a tight end in there, maybe he's more like your RB3. That's the trade-off you do with taking the quarterback or tight end. So you can get him as your RB4, I think, depending on how your draft unfolds. I just think there's potential with one of these guys. I hope it's just not a situation where they're both just kind of meh players. They're both, RB 26s or top 24 maybe. Or I hope one or both can kind of find success somehow, with Gibson maybe getting the catches and Robinson running between the tackles and getting touchdowns. So Chris Rodriguez Jr. is kind of a carbon copy of Brian Robinson Jr. So if anything happens, I don't think Antonio Gibson becomes the main guy. I think they just hand it off to Chris Rodriguez Jr. But yeah, into the receivers. This is part of the reason why I like Sam Howell. You have 2 really good receivers, in my opinion. Terry McLaurin, kind of like a DJ Moore guy, where it's just we know he's better than his stats are, just hasn't had the right quarterback, but still puts up 1,100 yards and when you watch him play, he looks awesome. Terry McLaurin, unfortunately, he did hurt his turf toe, which is always kind of scary, in my opinion. Scarier than it definitely sounds. You think, your toe's hurt, get over it. No, this is could be a serious injury. I know they said it's not super serious, which is good.
It's one of those lingering injuries that, and obviously, I seen the game where he got hurt, and you could tell he got tackled, and and he got up and he was grimacing really hard, and he went to the sideline. And he was pissed off because it was happening. So now I've heard that he could miss a couple games. So it went from he'll be ready for week 1, as they say all the time, to he could miss a couple weeks. So it's tough. That's kind of a bummer.
Sure. Yeah, and so now you're thinking it looks like he was going at the end of round 4. So do you drop him around, Dad? Like, do you kind of, if you don't want to take him in round 4, you want to take him at the end of round 5, maybe?
Yeah, I think I would. That if guys aren't ready, I have the attitude, you can't be giving away any weeks in fantasy football. So, in the beginning, I want all my players, that they're going to be healthy. If they get hurt during the middle of the year, then so be it. There's not much you can do about that. But, I want guys who I know that are going to be there week 1, and, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I'd probably still spend a late 5th, early 6th on him. And, the guy was, last year was the wide receiver 14 in half PPR. Now, he was wide receiver 14 playing every game, which is different than being the wide receiver 14 and missing a couple games, because really his average is more like a top 20 guy, not a top 15 guy. So, yeah, I'm interested to see with Sam Howell how it all plays out. I still like Terry McLaurin, and part of the reason people are lower on him is the next guy, Jahan Dotson, who has looked really good in kind of the limited time we've seen him. Last year, Jahan Dotson, first round pick, by the way. I think a lot of people overlooked that. The guy was drafted 16th overall. I think that escapes people's minds a little bit. Like, I forget where. I think he was the 4th wide receiver to go, maybe the 3rd.
Right around Wilson. He's right around Wilson and Olave, and
I guess it would be Drake London, Wilson, Jameson, and it might have been Dotson next. I'll go back and look, but so he's looked good in spurts. The first 4 weeks of last year, he caught 4 touchdowns, which is kind of what he did at in college at Penn State. A big touchdown guy, and then he got hurt, missed 5 games, came back, and then weeks 13 through 18, kind of the same thing. He had 3 more touchdowns in those 5 weeks. So, and he's looked good in preseason. People are super excited about him. All the advanced metrics love him. Dad, let me just ask you: Jahan Dotson, or straight up Jahan Dotson, or Terry
McLaurin? Dotson.
Mm-hmm. And you can get him as of now. This is not taking into account really the injury. Before injury, it was kind of, you could get him basically 4 rounds later too. So yeah, what are you expecting from him? Are you expecting him to take over do you expect it to be more of a 1A, 1B? Dotson's the alpha, McLaurin's the alpha. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, just kind of going back to McLaurin, I think we all like him as a receiver and stuff like that. And, he's not a huge volume guy. So he doesn't have 100 receptions and 8 touchdowns and stuff like that. Last 2 years, he's had 77. So, Dotson. So what does that mean for Dotson? I'm not sure the Commanders' offense is going to have a 100 catch guy or something like that, or a 90 catch guy. So if Dotson is an 80 catch guy, with 6 to 8 touchdowns, to me that'd be perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's explosive, man. Like, people have drawn comparisons to like Antonio Brown. Yeah, he's small. Like, he's not a big dude, which is always a concern with injuries. He's 185 pounds. Those type of receivers can survive in today's NFL now, just because things have changed. But yeah, people drawn comparisons. Antonio Brown was 185 pounds, but he played way bigger, and so does Jahan Dotson. He's a red zone guy, which you wouldn't expect. He plays big, explosive after the catch. So he was the 5th receiver taken. There was London, Wilson, Olave, like you mentioned, Dad, and then Jameson Williams and Jahan Dotson. So I think a lot of people just kind of forget that for whatever reason. I love Dotson. I love him a lot. So I think he's going to do really well, especially if McLaurin, could miss a couple weeks, a lingering toe issue all year. Who knows? Yeah. Give me Jahan Dotson. Curtis Samuel is still here, is a good wide receiver 3. Don't know how much you can rely on him in fantasy unless they're going to get a little creative with him, and which they have in the past. He's had a couple. Last year, he had 38 carries. That's like getting close to Debo stuff, And so if he gets that, he starts to become a little bit more useful. He only averaged 5 yards a carry, which is pretty low for wide receivers running the ball. Usually they average more like 7. So you can add 250 yards to him. I don't know. I think Curtis Samuel's a solid player. And if McLaurin misses time, then Samuel deserves to be on rosters. Do you agree with that, Dad?
Yeah, I agree. When he's got the ball in his hands, he looks pretty good. He had one year, 2021, where he missed a lot of. I think he had a hamstring issue. I had actually drafted him in a fantasy league and got kind of hosed by that. So there you go. Don't draft guys who are injured. But he caught 64 passes last year. I kind of consider him right in the same category. 38 carries. That's more than 2 a game. So
yeah. So. And this is what it does. So I think that year, 2020, is a good year to look at with this because he was on the Panthers. He was the wide receiver 3 on that team. If you remember, it was DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson at the time, and Curtis Samuel. All 3 of those guys produced. Even with it was Teddy Bridgewater. He produced 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers that year, which is a little strange. But that year, you had DJ Moore finish as the wide receiver 22. You had Robbie Anderson. Robbie Chosen is his name now, wide receiver 24. Curtis Samuel, wide receiver 25. So you had 3 top, basically wide receiver 2s. And I kind of think about this like very similar situation. And the reason why Samuel was able to get there is because he had 41 carries that year for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he doesn't need to get 1,000 yards receiving when he can catch 70 balls, get 800 yards, tack on another 200 yards rushing, boom, you're at 1,000 yards, I can see him kind of doing the same thing this year with Terry McLaurin. He's clearly the number 3 guy with McLaurin and Dotson, but,
Yeah, Samuel, the offensive coordinator again, so you're definitely going to utilize him probably, in this way, some carries.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you come from Kansas City, creative around the goal lines, type of stuff. So, other than that, there's no one to talk about at the wide receiver position, and no one to talk about, I don't think, at the tight end position. I mean, Logan Thomas had his 1 year. The guy's been in the league since 2014. I don't know if people realize that. He's 32 years old. He's had one good tight end year in 2020. Can't stay healthy. I don't want to draft him. Not a lot of upside. If you're going to draft anyone for upside on this team, I think it's actually Cole Turner. And he's has awesome hair, but he's a second year guy. Didn't do anything last year, so don't look up his stats because he did nothing. But he's intriguing because he's 6'6", 240 athletic type of guy. He's coming into his second year, but I'm just avoiding all these tight ends. I don't know about you, Dad.
Yeah, it's sorry, Logan Thomas. You looked promising a couple years back, but I think he's even got injury problems now. So
yeah, it's unfortunate. Made the switch though, quarterback to tight end, and good for him, But yeah, that's it. That's it with our 32 team series. It took us about a month to do. We're here, guys. We're here. Less than 2 weeks away from the football season. I think we're probably going to drop another video. I think maybe next Friday, just kind of quickly going through all the teams again. What's changed since, again, we recorded the Arizona episode before training camp even started for them. So a lot has changed for a lot of these teams. And so yeah, we're gonna end up doing that drop back Friday because most people are drafting over that Labor Day weekend. So other than that, we'll be here all fantasy season. Dad, thank you for doing this. A lot of fun.
No problem. I enjoyed it.
And,
I like going through these teams and picking these players apart and trying to figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah, especially because everyone knows the top guys for every team, and you're not going to, I stole CeeDee Lamb or I stole Terry McLaurin, but it's these other guys, the Curtis Samuels, where I just kind of talked myself right now into like, Curtis Samuel's actually kind of intriguing because like he carries the ball, right? I knew he carried the ball. I didn't realize he was getting 42 a game type of situation where. So things like that, you find some value in these late rounds and stuff like that. So hopefully it helped, and we're going to continue to be here and help during the football season. So other than that, we'll catch you guys next time.